From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, JOCO Community Radio. Attention all business owners and creative minds. Do you need a unique and personalized touch for your products? Look no further than Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs. We offer custom laser engraving services for a variety of products, including promotional items and corporate or personal gifts. With state-of-the-art equipment and a team of skilled designers, we can engrave intricate designs on virtually any material. Whether it's a special message, a company logo, or a custom design, Romika Laser Engraving will help you make your mark. And the best part, our prices are affordable and our turnaround time is quick.
I couldn't be happier with the work Romika Laser Engraving did for me. The engraving on my product was precise and exactly what I wanted.
So don't wait any longer to add a personal touch to your products. Call Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs today at 817-400-4040 or visit our website at romikadesigns.com. We look forward to helping you make your mark.
Hey travelers, do you want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call. That's right, call, because the best prices are not online. They're with SmartFares. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. Our prices are too low to publish online. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner or shopping. So stop searching all of those travel sites to find the lowest price on your next flight. Let one of our SmartFares expert travel agents find ridiculously low prices for you. Call SmartFares today and get the best price on your next flight. Guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
855-325-1820. 855-325-1820. That's 855-325-1820.
Have you ever met a single person in your life that enjoys paying taxes? No one does. If you can't sleep at night because you have a huge problem with the IRS, I've got some free advice for you. This service is strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
You're listening to JOCO Community Radio.
Well, good afternoon, Johnson County. Good afternoon, North Texas. Good afternoon, everybody watching. Thank you for joining us again on today's episode of Let Freedom Ring. I'm your host, Jake Wernette. As always, it's a blessing to be with you, whether you're listening or watching. To those regular viewers, we thank you for tuning in again today. For those who are just joining us for the first time, we welcome you. And we thank you for allowing this show to be a trusted informer to you, not only as an American citizen, but also as a voter and as a watchdog of your local, your state, and your federal governments. Today's episode is going to be a follow up piece to what we started last week, essentially discussing the policies of the Republican Party in this moving forward after this election, moving forward with the next legislative session. We have a Congress that has been swung to fully Republican on all fronts, a White House that is now leaning Republican again after a 4-year Biden administration. And we now have many more states that have swung Republican in even districts where Republicans had what was seen as no chance of carrying forward in those districts. In this show today, essentially what I'm going to be covering is a multitude of facets of essentially what makes up President Trump's agenda. What is the agenda for the Republican Party as a whole? What is the legislative agenda going to look like for our state? And how are we going to balance having a full Republican administration, essentially, for the majority of this country? And how are we going to hold those elected officials accountable? And that is a question I think a lot of us are asking ourselves right now, something that we see as very pertinent to the goals and the projects for what conservatives see as reclaiming, retaking the American nation back from uh, liberal socialism, those sorts of things. This show today is not going to debate the tenets of liberal socialism. We've done that many times on this show. But what we will cover is what you can expect from not only a Republican president, but the Congress and moving forward with our state government here in Texas. We're going to discuss some of the biggest issues for that. Now, before the show began, I had spent quite some time going through the year old videos from last year before the election, all the way up until 2021 that Trump had put on his YouTube page titled Agenda 47. Agenda 47 was essentially a series of videos. There's 15 of them originally, there's 14 now. And they were all up to 6-minute describers of essentially what former President Trump, now President elect Donald J. Trump, wanted to do in his presidency for his second term. Now, we can already assume that a lot of this got sidelined with the 2020 election, but I think a lot of us Republicans, a lot of us conservatives have been looking forward to the moment when we get a conservative agenda back in office. There was a lot of controversy, obviously, around Project 2025. Trump had said, I'm not affiliated with this. I don't even know what these people are trying to do. Um, Essentially, the media had played up this big propaganda campaign saying, look, this is what the agenda is. This is what the president wants to do. But given that this is a partisan environment and Americans have a very significant distrust of the media, I don't think people really got the grasp of what the real agenda was. So, going through it real quick, Trump gave 14 points in his Agenda 47. Now, I'm briefly going to go over these. I want to also discuss how Trump has moved away from the investigation into why Republicans lost in 2012. And the title of this being Policy and Populism, I want to touch on an aspect of how Republicans will win future elections. And if that is not something that we can cover in full today, we will do so over the next week, as I'm trying to use the rest of November and hopefully the beginning of December to move in a little bit of a direction of what we can expect come Inauguration Day, where we might even be able to cover that live. We're not sure just yet. Tenet number one was affordable energy. Essentially, what Trump's video had said was bringing manufacturing back entitles us to first lower energy costs. We need to do away with Green New Deal and especially the influence from Chinese lobbyists in the energy sector, abolishing the power plant mandate that harms expanding coal and nuclear power plants, do away with the EV mandate, and bring in more uh, affordable and more effective sources of energy like hydroelectricity. Trump also had vowed, as of 2021, before this election cycle ever began, to get rid of what he called Marxist prosecutors and creating a task force within the Department of Justice to rout out Soros backed lawyers and attorneys, and a federal inquiry into several of these incidents with a task force to head up protecting self defense laws for citizens that were wrongly convicted of murder or harming other individuals in the name of self defense instead of harming other people, which is what a lot of those cases were based off of that Trump had uh, cited in that video. He also wants the accountability for whoever had ordered the arrests of conservative and Christian individuals. Those had been seen numerous times, people having their doors kicked in by the FBI coming out and saying, well, we don't know who ordered this, testifying before that, saying, we're not allowed to disclose this or that. In the Senate committee hearing with Senator Josh Hawley for the Judiciary Committee, Trump wants to bring accountability to that. He also touched on ending drug addiction in 2021, long before this election ever took place. He wants to use presidential powers to put a naval embargo on drug imports and use the military to counter drug traffickers. And what he has carried over the last 3 years, a push for legislation to mandate the death penalty for drug dealers, makers, and kingpins attack the supply chain of illicit substances from Mexico and China. He also wants moral assistance laws that allow for to protect addicts over losing their jobs from recovery and rehabilitation programs. And he wants to expand the family leave to also entitle families to take off to support individuals within their family that have drug addiction. Human trafficking, Trump made a big push for legislation that not only assisted the victims of slavery and sex trafficking and child sex trafficking, but he wants to expand border protections to wage war on the cartels using the military, as well as using Title 42 to return trafficked children to their home country and to their respected families. A homelessness plan Trump had put out in 2021 stated that he wants to push out homelessness off the streets, cutting foreign aid to help our homeless veterans, and cutting the mass migration of unskilled labor to help Americans back home get better jobs. He wants also to work with the states to ban urban camping and arrest with the option of treatment or help for those individuals violating that order, and open inexpensive land to open facilities for medical help and get treatment for the homeless. And he also wants to work to rehabilitate homeless addicts. On top of that, reopening mental institutions. Chronic childhood illness. Now, this is something that President Trump had started on very early in 2021, something that has carried over to 2024 with this prior election with uh, an attorney who had been running as an independent that I don't even think many people knew about until he came out and they said, wow, I thought all the Kennedys had been shot. Now we have this really Giga Chad base dude named Robert Kennedy Jr., who is on board with President Trump and was just named the Secretary of Health and Human Services under Trump's support for longtime support for looking into chronic childhood illnesses. Now, it is very possible that RFK Jr. had gotten on board with Trump, kind of talked to him about this in 2021. We're not sure about how this was a tenet that was adopted by the Republican Party, But this is not something 20 years ago that you would have seen Republicans talking about. I went to a policy legislative conference here or down in Austin for 2 days this past weekend. And through that, I had met with everybody from policy groups to individuals that were elected to the state house for this next election. And outside of the conference, I toured the state capitol where I met with members of the legislative council, and the state house office. And a lot of what is getting pushed for in the federal government has also been pushed for by the state. We'll get into that in a second. But one of the three largest conservative leaning political strategy, political communications firms, the gentleman that was the CEO, the founder of that, had talked to me actually about the adoption of chronic illnesses and routing out the FDA becoming a Republican tenet of this election. And he says, this is not something 20 years ago that you would be in a room hearing Republicans run on. It would be seen as, expanding the government. It would be seen as influencing the private lives of American citizens. But this has come to the level where we have record amounts of obesity, record amounts of autism, record amounts of drug addictions, record amounts of everything in this country. And essentially what what Mr. Trump was addressing in 2021 was this crisis of not only drugs, but looking into what is causing the growth of a lot of these mental illnesses, especially in children. And that was something that RFK had been huge on. That was one of his biggest tenets, aside from gutting the three-letter agencies like the FDA and the CIA, which perfectly match the conservative Democrat platform would have been in the 1960s. The gentleman that I had spoken to in Austin said, it's kind of funny that the Democrats for a very long time had been seen as the party of individualism, the party of essentially these revolutionary movements like the hippies who had been big on herbal medicine, all of these things, getting rid of big pharma. And the Republican Party for many generations was seen as the counter to this, the party of big business and all this stuff, especially uh, having been taught that for three generations in the American school system. It's very hard for us to believe that this has become a tenet. But I'm actually very excited to see that this is something that the president wants to address and something that we can move forward with in an effort to kind of find a moderate middle ground between what Democrats have wanted and what Republicans want. This would allow more legislation to get through, perhaps using these key tenets that both can kind of moderately agree on to get more legislation pushed through. Now, Trump also in 2021 had discussed the citizenship executive orders. He wants no more automatic citizenship. On top of deporting illegal migrants and encouraging those individuals to go back to their country of origin, he wants to end, he called it in the video, birth doorism. Uh, it's technically called birthright citizenship by the legal definition. Essentially, uh, illegal individuals can come over the border. They can have children on American soil. Their children are given citizenship, being born on American soil, and after that, all of their children that come after that from that child will be given automatic citizenship. Now, Trump says we want to do away with this. Birthright citizenship should not apply to individuals who come across illegally. That will be a big part of his platform moving forward. The Reciprocal Trade Act, essentially leveraging equal amounts of tariffs for whatever countries are instating on the United States. He also, something that I thought was very interesting was a video titled Impoundment to Cut Waste, Inflation, and Crush the Deep State. So Trump brings up this constitutional theory. It's called impoundment. Obviously, that's what the video is called. Essentially, it's the constitutional debate over it is very rigorous. It's very controversial. But prior to Congress being given total authority over how the budget is carried out and how it's given to the president. The president had two different vehicles, apparatuses that he could use to check aggressive spending. Perhaps not all of it was spent, perhaps not all of it was needed. This was given to Bill Clinton, and it became a very big constitutional crisis in the 90s. Many of you younger folks, older than me, obviously, are going to remember this. It was the line item veto and impoundment. So the difference between the two is line item veto. Essentially, the president looks over the federal budget line by line and says, I want to strike this, I want to strike this. And he can do that even after the bill has been sent to his desk. Now, he can either from there sign it and line item veto those individual budget things to be abolished, or the president can send it back to the Congress to either overrule or amend the bill and then send it back to the president's desk. Overruling it would tell the president, no, you can't strike that out. Amending it would essentially abolish those items that were line item vetoed and send it back to the president for signature, which the bill becomes laws for appropriations to, federal agencies, those things of the sort. Trump wants to bring back this constitutional theory of impoundment, essentially giving the president authority to refuse to use any extra money that may not be needed, that may not even be used during that term. Now, otherwise, what would happen is the theory goes now, the modern theory especially is that these budget items have to be carried out, that there can be no extra money. If there is extra money, then the budget will be cut for those agencies the next term or the next year. And so a lot of these federal agencies simply spend the money because they're scared their budget will get cut, even if not all the money is going to be used. Now, a lot of this can go towards spurious expansion of these agencies. You can spend the money essentially on anything that is entitled as extra spending. So you could hire 50 bureaucrats and say, well, now that we've expanded this, we're going to need a bigger budget. And so Congress passes a bigger budget. And this is how the deficits have gotten bigger and bigger. And being bigger, the money needs to get printed so that it can back up those budgets. And this is how debt is created, because the more money that is spent, the more money that's created. Essentially, our dollar, being a fiat currency, is debt backed. There is no gold standard, there is no silver standard. After 1896 and William Jennings Bryant's speech, the cross of gold essentially in favoring of the greenback system, which we still use after the Civil War. The theory that Trump wants to bring back in is the president can essentially say, look, we haven't used this at all this year. This is extra money that we don't need. Get rid of it. Send it back to the general fund for the Treasury Department. And of course, that can either be refunded through tax write-offs for the federal government to give back to the citizens. They can be essentially just refunded through tax refunds, or they can go into a savings account for the federal government. Now, what could be great about this is essentially Trump could get the head start on paying off the national debt, which we would have to create a whole new monetary standard. For those who watched many of our financial and fiscal policy videos on this station, you're going to remember a lot of what is being discussed. But this could pave the way towards Republicans creating a system that not only pays off the national debt, but can keep us out of national debt. Trump goes on to essentially want to bring back the auto industry. He makes that a big one. Cut shortages of medicine by bringing home production for medicinal medicines. I don't want to use, illicit substances, because there's a difference if I say the word drug. But the biggest part of Trump's video on the shortage of medicine is ending reliance on foreign drug production, especially in China. He makes the claim that China produces 90% of Tylenol, 50% of global penicillin, and through creating apparatuses in the federal government to help expand hiring for U.S. drug production, he hopes that he can cut down the cost for that. Essentially, education is the biggest one that most people are focused on now. Trump has made numerous claims going back to 2021 saying he wants to gut and eventually abolish the Department of Education on top of the Department of Energy. He makes 10 claims in this video. Essentially, to summarize, he says, respect the right of parents for choosing their child's education, empowering schools to keep good teachers, and relieving those poor educators. Ensure classrooms are focused on teaching academics, not politics. He wants to ensure that prayer is brought back and enshrined in schools as a constitutional right of the students. Immediate expulsion of violent and onerous students. School choice, which is the biggest thing in Texas right now. Project-based learning opportunities. I see this as one of the biggest things that are needed in especially public schools and colleges today. Is we can go through lectures, we can go through the classroom. These project-based learning experiences offer students a chance to not only take learning into their own hands and do their own research, become critical thinking citizens, but this would be something that allows students to get career, to get job experience, to look into putting theories into practice and getting what my parents would call, the critical life skills, the experience, and essentially common sense instead of just book smarts, which there's a difference between the two. But, for bookish people like me, it's very hard not to want to pick up a book. The 13th video essentially focused on rebuilding the military. He wants to walk back NATO membership for Ukraine. He made that claim in 2021 in the video. Provide record funding for the military, bring back domestic production capacities for armaments, and ask Europe to refund every dollar amount that the U.S. has sent for support in the Ukraine war. In the 14th video, essentially, for every one regulation that's passed, two have to be abolished. So Trump wants to walk back the state apparatus of regulation as well. Now, this is all from Trump's YouTube channel, from his playlist titled Agenda 47. Now, I want to go through also what the 2024 Republican Party platform has said and discuss a lot of how these policies can get enacted. Essentially, the point going forward is that these policies won Trump this second term. He's now going to have to focus instead of making claims. The Republican legislature, the House, the Senate are going to have to pick up the slack and move forward with the program that they see in the best interests of the country. They're going to have to get out of the way. And of course, by get out of the way, that leaves the door open for Democrats to use inefficiency in the Congress, not providing for the American people. That could cost Republicans either chamber or both in the next midterms during Trump's presidency. So this is something that going forward, Trump is going to really have to press the national legislature, the Congress, to get this done. Before we get too far into what the national platform is, I'd like to talk a little bit about essentially what I had discussed with legislators in Austin over this last weekend. For those just joining, I was down in Austin for a 2-day conference with the Public Policy Foundation, a very generous opportunity that I was provided, and I am thankful for them for that. Being a member of the Leadership Council in Fort Worth, it's given me the opportunity to make a trip down to Austin for the first time ever, not only see the state capitol, but to talk to some of the folks that work there. So outside of the conference, we kind of discussed legislative key points for this next session, and the key legislatures that have already been elected, those who are waiting to be sworn in, and what their policies are going to be. I also had the chance to talk to some of the members of the Texas Legislative Council and the House office down there for the folks that run the Policy Council, getting the bills to the to the House floor and essentially controlling the whole process behind the scene. After the bill gets there, the bill leaves, and it's a lot of hard work. had not even known that the office existed. I have been a Texan for almost 10 years now and have never been to the state capitol. So being there was a learning opportunity for sure. Of course, us young folks, we like to think we know everything, but it's a real good experience. And I encourage the younger viewers, if you ever get the chance, um, to go either for free or you get the chance to save up and go to Austin. Don't skimp on going to the state capitol. Texas is a very generous state. You can go to the state capitol. You can go down to any of the offices. You can walk right into the Capitol Police office and talk to the folks. It's a very transparent state. Things are very good in this state. I think that we as Texans take advantage of that a lot of times. But here in the next segment, I want to essentially discuss the legislative process, what we can look for in both the national and the state legislatures, what our biggest issues are going to be, and how we can hold Republican representatives accountable. Stick with us. God bless you.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
You're listening to Joco Community Radio.
Welcome back, Johnson County. Welcome back, North Texas. For all of our out-of-state listeners, welcome back. Before we get into the next segment, I'd like to say that NTX Radio is a radio and podcast collective proudly serving all of North Texas. We can be heard all over the world on the TuneIn Radio Network and on the NTX Radio app, available on Android, Apple CarPlay, or just ask Alexa to play NTX Radio. Check out our lineup and more at ntxradio.com. We want to thank our valued partners in helping us amplify the voices of North Texas. Be sure to connect with Todd Hurd and Associates, attorneys at law for all of your civil law needs at texasattorneylaw.com. If you're processing credit cards, join the Swipe Nation today and save on processing fees at swipenationusa.com, locally owned and operated. The holidays are just around the corner. Be sure to shop the Tiffy.com for Tiffy sleeves and scarves. When you're ready to deliver the right message to the right people at the right time, email Tiffany at t.hurd@ntxradio.com for advertising rates. We spent the first segment of today's show carrying over a discussion from last week. We had spent several weeks doing several series for this election. I think it's one of the biggest in American history, not quite for the reasons that the media has told you, but for reasons other than that. This not only shows a paradigm shift in the way that Republicans could win elections, but it also propels Republicans forward to have to be accountable to the promises that they've made. And they've made quite a lot in the last year and a half. So, getting down to the nitty gritty, I know this is a sort of a program that is supposed to discuss state, federal, and local elections. All of that had kind of been skimmed over this last month, which we discussed national level election trends going back to 1860 to 1960. We discussed the 1972 Nixon election. We talked about the 1980s. We went forward to 2 weeks worth of election coverage pre-election day for maps, outlooks, and predictions. We did a full 7-hour broadcast on election day, the longest in the station's history, the first ever live election coverage for a local station on any radio in the entire state, as far as I'm concerned. Most certainly the North Texas region. And now we're kind of on the benchmark of what appears to be the next discussion for this show, and that is essentially looking at the policy, looking at current events, looking at where we can kind of see Congress and the state legislatures getting to work on this. Now, for those who are just joining, I spent the weekend in Austin over this last weekend, Friday and Saturday, and it was a very busy weekend. I spent a lot of my time at the Public Policy Foundation's offices discussing with fellow leadership members there, essentially the outlook for the legislative session this next year. And outside of that time, I spent as much time as I could in the state capitol, which I think a lot of us take for granted. I know I certainly have. I've been a Texan almost a decade now and have never been to my own state capitol. And it's actually the largest Capitol building in the United States now that they have put extensions onto it, giving it 650,000 square feet of office space, of corridors, of great walking distance. So if you're elected, I know Helen Kerwin had gotten elected by a large margin here in the last election. I want to congratulate her and the many other representatives who have just gotten elected for the first time, or those who have beat an incumbent for the first time in any of their districts. Congratulations. Now begins the hard part on getting to work for the Texans and the American people. So I want to share a little bit about my experience with you on this, and essentially, I know I've made a big deal about federal policy. We're going to instead use the rest of today's time to discuss state policy. And I'm going to share a little bit about my experience at the state capitol and to show you how the legislative system in this state really works. Now, I know a lot of people look at this map and they're like, oh, yeah, I've definitely been to the Capitol. Well, if you haven't been in several years, if it was has been your first time like me, this is all essentially what you would have seen: the first, second, third, fourth floor. Recent extensions that were made just a few years back, it hasn't been too long ago. This is where all of your state house and state senate offices are. And it's a very, very massive building. Now, E1 and E2, they've put 2 entire floors on this, complete with 8 committee hearing rooms, 1 designated specially for the House Appropriations on the House side, and the Senate Finance Committee room on the Senate side. Now, I've got photos of walking down this hallway. This is just one of the most massive legislative buildings I've ever been to, and I've been to about 2 in my life. So it's not like my family goes on vacation and says, we're definitely going to stop by this state's capital. A lot of times it's not really on our drive, but don't take advantage of getting to learn about government. It's very fascinating. Now, E2, for anybody who is in the 58th House District here for the State House of Representatives, which is Johnson County for a big margin. This is your office, E2604, as it stands right now. Incumbent Dwayne Burns is vacating the office. Helen Kerwin will be in after her swearing in. And 604 may move to a number of any of these other offices. So sit on that for a little bit. It might change. I might be wrong here in the next few months, but this is your state house office, as it has been for quite some time now. Just a massive building. There's 16 entire committee rooms. And for the folks who have been there, this will all look familiar. For me, this was all brand new, so it was real fun to get to see all this. But the extension is super cool looking. You know, you have this really long hallway from the elevators you get out. Essentially, what would have used to have been the basement, probably some records rooms, has now been extended into several hundred offices and nearly 3/4 of a million square feet of office space. So these are all some grandiose looking images, and it's a really good looking building. They did an outstanding job on it. But essentially, a lot of what people are not taught in public schools, something that I think really needs to be revised. So if you're a school teacher, feel free to take this from me. If you're a homeschool parent or student, feel free to take this too. A bit of advice before we get into discussing for the rest of the time today what legislative policies are going to be the biggest this session. I want to talk a little bit about how your bills are made. Now, anybody can write a bill for the state house or the state senate. Ideally, in a legislative system, there has to be an equivalent of the same bill in both the Senate and the House, and they have to be voted on by both of them. Now, this is why in the United States, uh, they aren't always the same, but for the most part, 90% of those bills will be equivalent in some manner. They could be written by the same person, they could be written by separate people. If it's written by somebody in the House, or it's written by somebody in the Senate, or if it's written by an interest group. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong on my numerical system here, but Senate Bill 686 and House Bill 1350 we discussed several months back. The censorship bills for U.S. data firms, for U.S. Tech firms, essentially giving the president and Congress control over all of that stuff, really militarizing it as Harry Truman did with steel mills in the 1940s. Same concept, but those two were equivalent bills for the House and the Senate. Now, in state government, you have to have the same. You have to have equivalents in both the House and the Senate. You can submit one as a private citizen to be voted on. Now, when those bills get drafted, they get put in, uh, there has to be an exquisite amount of research done for those policies. Uh, you might not be a mathematician, but the folks in the Capitol are looking for numbers. They're wanting to know how it impacts economic performance. They want to see exact numbers. They can see the data, and they can see how it will affect state policy and state outcomes going forward. Now, uh, folks like the Texas Public Policy Foundation can do that. They have folks that might be able to research it. They might have folks that write those bills, but anybody can do it so long as their bill is backed up enough. You can't just submit something saying it's National Ice Cream Day or it's State Lukewarm Tap Water Day. Now, when these bills get there, a lot of the work is not actually done. It can be, but it's most likely not by your state legislators. Now, the folks that I had the great privilege to meet in the legislative council work in the extension and in the upper level offices of the state capitol are really brilliant folks. I had the pleasure to meet some of them, some my age that were just recent college graduates who were at work researching bills, putting them towards those committees, numerous other things. There were stacks of bills this high off the ground. For the folks watching, this is probably about my height if I'm getting off the stool here. But lots of bills are put in front of these folks to review. They can put them to the committees. The committees can toss them out. They can do research. They can be withheld for the next session. It's all about how efficient the bill is in the grand scheme of this big process. The Texas Legislative Council, the TLC, is actually the folks who put in a lot of the legroom working with those state house members. They will go to the state house offices and ask these folks, do you want to sponsor this bill? Do you want to help us draft the bill? Do you want to be a part of this process? Now, when you get into the state Senate, they will do the same thing with the state senators. A lot of this process is determined essentially by multitudes of factors, those who are interested in the bill, those who are big proponents, and those who are likely to debate the material within the bill. They will look for people to sponsor the bill that are key advocates of the same thing, that have made that a big policy of their platform, and those who are likely to want to carry it out or be vocal for that bill on the House or the Senate floor. The Texas Legislative Council does a lot of the work for the legislative process, and in the federal Congress, I'm not sure what the equivalent would be. It would most likely be the bureaus that are tasked with reviewing the legislation that these committees put forth. Now, the state capitol is a massive building with a lot of interconnected parts, but they all seem to agree on three big factors being up for debate in the next session. And that is school choice, property taxes, and taxpayer funded lobbying. Now, what I was told, not only by some of the largest political communications folks in the state who were asked, to take on national level projects for these same policies, but several legislators that I had spoken to and several of the TLC members I had spoken to had agreed that these factors were going to be the biggest. Now, school choice, there's been a big debate. We kind of had a pretty decent discussion on this with members like Georgia Whitehead from Families Engaged for Effective Education. I've had the great pleasure to talk to some Mary Lowe and some of the other individuals about their perspectives on this. And I think one thing that people can see eye to eye on is parents should have total control over their child's education. And when the child becomes old enough to want to take a part in that, then the family should be the biggest influence in their child's education, the children themselves included. A lot of what is being thrown out today is the idea of universal school choice. And a lot of this has to go through the process of vouchers, of educational savings accounts, ESAs. Both of these have been proposed. Now, I'm a big proponent, instead of either of those, of letting the money follow the child and giving the families, providing insight into essentially my ideal policy for this would be that the money would follow the child, and the way that the parents would get that money back is through tax refunds on the expenditures that they've given. And it takes quite a while for taxes to be processed, which is why property tax is also a big part of this debate in this next legislative session. Essentially, school choice, universal school choice, school vouchers, all of this is going to be a very large part of the next legislative session. Now, Helen Kerwin has made adamant that she is in favor of this. She will vote in favor of school choice for parents. There's a lot of debate, however, on how she is going to do this from several factions within the community. I want to assure them, if you want total control, total transparency over the legislative process, there is no better way than going down to Austin to either advocate, to testify, or even help write the bill. There's possibilities for that. Getting involved through local, through state policy groups, and getting involved and getting in touch with the Texas Legislative Council would be your primary apparatus to do that. If you're not in Austin weekly, like me, I'm not in Austin all the time. I would like to make a pilgrimage down there every now and then to give a ruckus at the state capitol, but unfortunately, I don't have the money or the gas to do that. So, getting involved is a very big part of this. Families Engaged is just one of those that's has one perspective. There are a lot of groups that are debating this. Now, property tax is going to be the next big thing. Helen Kerwin and several others have been proponents of cutting back significantly the way property taxes affect citizens in their state house districts, and eventually, or as soon as a replacement is duly suited, getting rid of property tax completely. I'm a proponent of getting rid of it completely because there's no reason that anybody should be paying rent to the state or the federal government for land that they supposedly own. That doesn't really sound like the American dream to me, and I know it doesn't sound like the American dream to folks out there. But property taxes. Now, the CAD board, the Central Appraisal District here in Johnson County, I want to give them a big shout out, especially to the property tax groups here in Johnson County. Through some of the brilliant and brave citizens who speak up, several of them have taken up these positions as leaders in their communities, and a lot of them have run for these Central Appraisal District boards, and effectively have switched Johnson County over to one that is fighting now on behalf of the citizens instead of the bureaucrats in unelected positions, those who run school budgets, those who run local budgets that we don't get to meet with. So I want to thank them, and I want to give them a special shout out for that, because what they had did is going to be a big part of what several other CAD boards in the state are going to have to do if this property tax controversy is going to be solved. Uh, we are pushing for the abolishment of property tax. Now, whether that is replaced by a flat tax, a consumption tax, a hotel tax, or a state sales tax on top of a county sales tax or a local sales tax, is beyond me. But what I do know is that a lot of these CAD boards have swung, and especially Johnson counties has now gone to appraisals every 3 years, the first in the state to do that, which the law gives them up to 3 years in intermediary period until they have to reassess properties. Now, this could be a great thing for property owners in the county, for the state. This could lead to people getting lower appraisals as inflation cuts down over time, as wages hopefully go up, as numerous other factors are resolved within the national economy. We could see a great decrease in property tax and the ability for our state to take action on this. But this is the second part of it. Taxpayer funded lobbying is a big one. Now, in terms of school choice, this is what one legislator had told me about in Austin here this past weekend. Taxpayer funded lobbying is going to be the third crucible in this great legislative session. Essentially, taxpayer funded lobbying are bureaus or school boards or other city, state government agencies using taxpayer dollars to pay lobbyists, to pay attorneys to go fight for their behalf instead of for the citizens. Now, these unelected bureaucrats and elected bureaucrats, they can be school boards, they can be school districts, they can be city governments, they can be county governments. They pay these bureaucrats to go down to Austin and lobby against certain bills, like maybe cutting property tax, uh, giving school choice to parents and students, letting the money follow the students, those sorts of things. These bureaucrats are hired, they're sent down to Austin. They can be attorneys or they can be policy experts. And essentially, they're sent down to Austin, funded by the same parents that want school choice, the same parents who want property tax abolished in this state. Uh, their taxpayer dollars are funding these school boards, these bureaus, to fight against them on the bureau's behalf. Now, several legislators have already made it evident that they plan on raising this as an issue. From what they had told me here several days back, that a lot of state house members, a lot of state senators are going to be taking up and championing this cause through the TLC, through other apparatuses in the state capitol, to get a bill that finally abolishes and bans both the revolving door for state house members to become bureaucrats to lobby and to get rid of the apparatus for these bureaus to hire people on taxpayer dollars. Now, as for me, I don't personally like Lizzo, but I've got to say it's about dang time for that. So these three things are going to be the most controversial topics that are raised this legislative session. Now, I could get one or two wrong. More than likely, I'm 67% of the way on this. School choice and property tax are going to be the biggest ones. And for those who are worried about your state legislators, don't be, because you can take part in this process just as equally as any of them can. The old saying goes is that a team is only as strong as its weakest link, and we don't need our citizens to be the weakest link in this equation, because when one of us declines, the entire equation is worth less than what it should be. So if you're worried about school choice, if you're worried about property taxes and the bills not being put forth the way that you want them to, you can go down to Austin. You can lobby as a citizen, you can testify. There are also other apparatuses. I just told you how our state legislative uh, process works. TLC, the Legislative Council for the state of Texas, is one of the biggest agencies that takes part in writing and drafting and researching these bills. You can be a part of that as a citizen. Just reach out to them. There are ways to get involved. You can go down to the state capitol and work with these folks, testify. You can read the bill while it's still in session before it's ever passed. Those things are not secret. You can access them. Uh, another great Another great way to get involved, if you feel like writing a bill, is to get involved with a policy group. There are plenty of them around. Get involved as a citizen. You don't have to be taking a paycheck from a bureau to help in the legislative process. Now, in the next week, what we're going to be discussing is essentially what I had prepared for today. I thought it was more important to discuss this local aspect more so than nationalizing the program for another day. I want to talk a little bit about how President Trump, how the Republican Congress, and even a Republican Supreme Court, mostly what are seen as conservatives on the Supreme Court, are going to react, not only in terms of getting this policy passed for the many promises that were made by Republican legislators, Republican candidates this election cycle, but also we might even have some debates on this program where folks can call in, where folks can discuss this with us, and we can essentially see eye to eye on how this process is going to play out. Because I believe for us as citizens, this is going to be one of the most crucial and important moments in our nation's history after any election, is figuring out how you can partake in that process. Now, for most days, 99% of them, I'm a great optimist. I like to think that I will have a job in government where I can serve my citizens, where I can use all of the experience that I've ever gotten so far to better the condition of my state and my country. Uh, Not necessarily for a party or for one individual first, but for the people that deserve it. Most of us citizens, I think, can be pessimists too in some days. We feel like there is no opportunity for us to partake in this. We feel like there is no opportunity for us to get engaged. And we feel like all but every door in the system has been closed to us, from being able to draft, to being able to help, and being able to take part in a process that we were born into, that we don't necessarily uh, like the way that it's going. And that's how I feel 1% of the time. And this is something that can be cured by hard work. It's not something that can be sat on. It's not something that can be meandered around. You've got to go through it. You've got to get involved, and that's just the state of the system. We may not like the way it works, but it's the most efficient and the best one that we've got for us as American citizens. So here in the next week, look forward to us having more discussions on federal policy, where we go from here, and how Trump plans on getting these bills, these policies passed, because Republicans are going to have to act. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. May the blood of Christ wash over this government and this country. We desperately need it. And let's take our country back, not for one party, not for one agenda, but for us as the American people. God bless you.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godly, this